My name is Maria. I was born in a small village where everyone knew each other's business, but no one ever bothered to care. I grew up surrounded by poverty, pain, and struggles. My family was no different from the others, barely making ends meet, living from day to day, never having enough. My father worked as a farmer and my mother stayed home, trying to take care of us three kids. But their love for each other couldn't save us from the harsh realities of life. We lived in a tiny house made of mud and straw, which would leak during the rainy season. Our meals were scarce, and sometimes I went to bed hungry. I dreamed of a better life, of escaping the life of poverty that seemed to be my only option. I wanted to help my family, to give my younger siblings the things I never had. But the more I tried, the more life seemed to push back. At the age of 16, I fell in love with a boy named Ahmed. He was kind, caring, and always seemed to have a smile on his face. He was the one person who made me forget the struggles of my life, even if it was just for a few hours. We dreamed together of a life where we would both escape the confines of our village and start a family of our own. But life, as it often does, had other plans for me. One day, Ahmed came to me with tears in his eyes. He told me he had to leave for the city to work. His family needed money, and he couldn't stay behind. He promised me he would return for me, that he would come back and take me away from this place. I believed him, and I waited. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. But Ahmed never returned. I tried to continue living my life, but I couldn't shake the feeling of abandonment. My heart ached every time I thought about him. I couldn't understand why he had left, why he had broken his promise. Life became even harder after he left. My father's health deteriorated, and my mother became ill. I had to step up and help care for them, all while trying to study and work to make ends meet. But everything changed one rainy evening when a letter arrived. It was from Ahmed. He apologized for leaving without saying goodbye, explaining that he had fallen into bad company in the city. He had been caught up in things that were beyond his control. He had gotten into trouble with the law, and he was now in prison. My heart broke as I read the words. The person I had loved was now a prisoner, and I felt as though my whole world had shattered. I didn't know what to do. I felt angry, hurt, and betrayed. But at the same time, I felt pity for him. He had made choices that led him down a dark path, and now he was paying the price. I knew I had to forgive him, but the pain was too much. It took me a long time to heal, but eventually, I realized that I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep blaming Ahmed for the choices he made. I had my own life to live, my own future to build. I worked harder, studied longer, and eventually, I was able to get a scholarship to attend college in the city. It wasn't easy, but I pushed through the hardships, always remembering the lessons I had learned along the way. Years passed and I graduated. I got a job at a local hospital where I helped others who were suffering. But I never forgot about Ahmed. I never stopped thinking about him, wondering if he had ever found redemption. One day, I received another letter from him. He had served his time and had turned his life around. He was working as a mechanic in the city, and he was hoping to reconnect. I wasn't sure what to feel. Part of me wanted to forgive him, to give him another chance. But another part of me knew that I had changed, that I was no longer the person I had been when I had loved him. I wrote him a letter back, thanking him for reaching out, but telling him that I had moved on. I had learned to love myself, to live for myself, and I no longer needed him to complete me. I wished him the best in his life, but I knew I had to let go of the past. Years went by, and I continued my journey, focusing on my career and personal growth. But the memories of the past, especially of Ahmed, never fully left me. I often thought about how different things could have been, but I also understood that life wasn't meant to go according to our plans. Sometimes, the people we love most make mistakes, and sometimes, we need to let go of them to find peace within ourselves. As I settled into my job at the hospital, I started meeting people from different walks of life. I met people who had overcome hardships, who had found their way out of dark places, and who had become stronger because of their struggles. Each of them had a story that inspired me, and I realized that my own story could be one of strength too. But it wasn't until I met a young woman named Sarah that I understood the true meaning of redemption. Sarah was a patient at the hospital who had been in a terrible accident. Her body was broken, and she was in pain, but it was her spirit that amazed me. She was only 22, but she had already been through so much in her life. She had been in an abusive relationship, struggled with addiction, and lost her family due to her mistakes. But when I spoke to her, I saw a fire in her eyes, a determination to rise above her past and start fresh. Sarah reminded me of myself, and for the first time in years, I felt a connection to someone who truly understood what it meant to be broken and rebuild oneself. She taught me that no matter how far you fall, there is always a way to rise again. She had found a new purpose in life, and it was through helping others who were going through the same struggles that she had overcome. As Sarah healed, so did I. We spent a lot of time together, sharing our stories, encouraging each other, and pushing each other to become better. I realized that healing wasn't just about overcoming pain. It was about accepting the past, learning from it, and using it to grow. Sarah showed me that true strength doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from embracing our flaws and moving forward with hope. One day, Sarah asked me if I had ever thought about reaching out to Ahmed. She could see the unresolved pain in my heart, and she believed that forgiveness might be the key to truly moving on. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready. After all, so much time had passed, and I had built a new life for myself. But deep down, I knew that holding on to the past, even with anger or resentment, was only holding me back. I sat down and wrote Ahmed a letter. This time, it wasn't a letter filled with anger or bitterness, but one filled with understanding. I told him that I had learned to forgive him, not for his sake, but for mine. I thanked him for the lessons he had unknowingly taught me, and I wished him nothing but peace and happiness in his new life. Months passed, and I didn't hear from him. Part of me wondered if he had even received the letter, or if he had moved on from everything, just as I had. But I knew that I had done my part. I had forgiven, and I had let go. That was all I could control. Then, one rainy afternoon, I received a phone call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I answered, and to my surprise, it was Ahmed. His voice was calm, but I could hear the emotion in it. He thanked me for the letter and told me how much it had meant to him. He had been on a difficult path for many years, but he had finally found peace within himself. He had learned from his mistakes, and he wanted to reconnect, not to pick up where we had left off, but to simply acknowledge the past and move forward. We spoke for hours that day, sharing our experiences and realizing how much we had both changed. We agreed to meet in person, but not to rekindle anything from the past, just to share our journeys, our healing, and our growth. When we met, I saw a different man in front of me. He was no longer the young boy I had once loved. He was someone who had gone through struggles, just as I had, and had found his own redemption. It was a beautiful moment, and in that moment, I understood that the past wasn't meant to be forgotten, but embraced. It was through the pain, the heartbreak, and the mistakes that we truly found ourselves. I realized that the road to redemption isn't a destination, it's a lifelong journey. It's about learning from the past, forgiving ourselves and others, and moving forward with hope. It's about accepting that life isn't perfect, but that doesn't mean it's not worth living. And in the end, I learned that redemption isn't about fixing the past, it's about making the present and the future better. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves, no matter how many times we stumble along the way. As I continue my journey, I carry with me the lessons I've learned, and I share them with others. I know that I am not defined by my struggles, but by how I rise from them. And I will keep rising, because the road to redemption never truly ends.